Some movies scare you with blood, monsters, and jump scares. But the films on this list do something far more difficult. They build tension so precisely and so quietly that by the time anything happens, your hands are already shaking. These are not just great horror films. These are movies that critics have ranked among the most terrifying ever made. And every title in this ranking is available now on streaming or digital platforms, depending on your region. From psychological nightmares and claustrophobic survival films to a 1975 blockbuster that made the entire world afraid of water, these are 7 movies so tense they are almost unbearable to watch. The Witch. This movie does not rely on jump scares or violence to create its effect. It relies on something much harder to shake. The feeling that something is deeply, irreparably wrong. Set in 1630s New England, the film follows a devout Puritan family, banished from their colonial plantation and forced to build a new life at the edge of a vast, dark forest. The world they inhabit is cold, isolated, and governed by a faith so consuming that fear and belief become impossible to separate, and then the baby disappears. What makes this film so effective is how completely it traps the viewer inside the family's terror. There is no outside world, no help coming, and no rational explanation offered. The dread builds slowly, scene by scene, until the film feels less like watching a horror movie and more like watching a family being taken apart from the inside. The Witch holds 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is the kind of film that stays with you for days after the credits roll. Hereditary. This movie does not just frighten its audience, it dismantles them. Ari Aster's 2018 debut follows the Graham family in the aftermath of the matriarch's death. What begins as a portrait of grief slowly reveals itself to be something far worse. The horror does not arrive through gore or cheap mechanics. It arrives through the slow realization that the family has no idea what is happening to them, and that by the time they do understand, it is already far too late. Toni Collette delivers one of the most terrifying performances in the history of the genre. Every scene is constructed with a precision that keeps the viewer permanently off balance. The quietest moments are the most disturbing, and the moment that changes everything, roughly a third of the way through, is genuinely one of the most shocking scenes ever put on film. Hereditary holds 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is not a film you watch for entertainment. It is a film that happens to you. No Country for Old Men. This movie is one of the most tension-filled films ever made, and it is barely considered a horror film. That is exactly what makes it so effective. The Coen brothers' 2007 masterpiece follows a hunter who stumbles onto the aftermath of a drug deal gone wrong and makes one decision. He takes the money. What follows is a pursuit driven by Anton Chigurh, a man who operates without conscience, without remorse, and without any recognizable human motive. He is not a monster in the traditional sense. He is something worse. He is completely calm. What makes this film so unbearable is the silence. The Coens strip the soundtrack almost completely, forcing the viewer to sit inside every scene with no musical signal about what is coming. Every closed door, every motel room, every quiet conversation feels loaded with the possibility of violence. No Country for Old Men holds 93% on Rotten Tomatoes and won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. It is a masterpiece of controlled, suffocating dread. Prisoners. This movie takes the most primal fear a parent can have and turns it into 2.5 hours of relentless, escalating pressure. When two young girls disappear on Thanksgiving afternoon, their fathers respond in completely different ways. What begins as a missing persons investigation becomes something far darker and far more morally complicated than the genre usually allows. The film does not offer a clean hero. It offers a series of desperate choices and forces you to ask what you would actually do in the same situation. Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman give career-defining performances, and director Denis Villeneuve orchestrates everything with a patience that makes every scene feel like the pressure is about to crack through the screen. There is a sequence involving a basement and a locked room that is among the most distressing in modern cinema. Prisoners holds 81% on Rotten Tomatoes and an 8.1 on IMDb. It is the rare thriller that gets harder to watch the longer it goes. A Quiet Place. This movie turned a single premise into one of the most inventively terrifying experiences in recent horror history. And it did it almost entirely without sound. In a world overrun by blind creatures that hunt by hearing, a family survives by communicating in sign language, walking on sand-covered floors, and living every moment knowing that one wrong sound means death. The world building is extraordinary. Every detail of how the family has adapted tells you something about how long they have been surviving and how much they have already lost. What makes this film so physically distressing is the way it implicates the audience. In a silent film, every sound in the theater becomes part of the experience. The film does not just put characters in danger, it makes you feel like you are in the room with them. A Quiet Place holds 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. It proves that silence can be far more terrifying than any sound. Jaws. This movie invented the modern blockbuster, but that description undersells what it actually is. Jaws is one of the most precisely constructed tension machines ever put on screen. Steven Spielberg's 1975 film follows a small island town terrorized by a great white shark at the height of tourist season. Spielberg was forced by a malfunctioning mechanical shark to hide the creature for most of the film, showing only glimpses, shadows, and the reactions of people in the water. What he discovered in the process is one of the most important lessons in horror history. What the audience cannot see is always more terrifying than what it can. The result is a film that builds across its entire runtime through music, perspective, and the specific terror of deep water. The claustrophobic final act aboard a slowly sinking boat is still as effective today as it was in 1975. The famous two-note theme alone can still make a room go quiet. Jaws holds 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is the film that taught an entire industry how tension works. Alien. This film should not have worked. A science fiction horror movie set on a commercial freighter with a creature that appears on screen for only a few combined minutes, made by a director on only his second feature, and it became one of the most terrifying films ever made. After nearly 5 decades, it still is. Ridley Scott's 1979 masterpiece follows the crew of the Nostromo, who bring something back from an unknown planet that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped, and cannot be seen until it is already too late. The alien has no weakness and no motivation the human mind can process. It is loose in dark corridors with nowhere to go. What Scott understood is that the most terrifying version of any threat is the one that moves through the environment as if it owns it. Every scene is built to make the viewer feel the smallness and total isolation of the people on screen. Space in this film is not an adventure. It is a void that does not care whether you live or die. Alien holds 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is the gold standard of tension in cinema, and nothing has come close to replacing it. So now, the question is simple. In these films, what feels more unbearable to you? The tension that builds before anything happens, or the moment when it finally does? Write it in the comments. And if you want more rankings covering the films that critics consider the most intense and the hardest to sit through, subscribe now, because the next list is going to be even more brutal.